Good evening. I am the narrator, and welcome to my parlor. Tonight's story is The Lighthouse. Growing up in a small town, one is sheltered, unless that small town is on a coast. My town, Ensley, was a shipping hub due entirely to location. That is, the shores of Talcott Sea. Every ship had to deliver its cargo at our docks, where it was sent to the mainland. They came from everywhere. Growing up, I watched this keenly. My family wasn't old stock. We hadn't lived there for generations. We weren't there at the founding. Rather, we moved there shortly before my birth. Still, our arrival wasn't news. I understand our neighbors didn't greet us. In fact, they seemed not to notice us at all. Only gradually did we blend in, and only on the surface. We came to know our neighbors by their first names and the local business sorts, the grocer, the doctor, the sales clerks, and so on. We could, in essence, function. At school, I was never called to the chalkboard or to answer questions. I was never expected to read aloud or give presentations. During recess, my peers allowed me to take part, but only as obliged. We accepted this. It befits a place so insular. Education wasn't valued. The docks didn't demand it. There was one school which taught only essentials. Classes ended at the 6th grade. My days were at the beach, watching the ships arrive to be unloaded. I had to from a distance, lest the workers complain, but I think they appreciated the audience. The docks spanned the beach from end to end. Space was scant for the town folks' leisure. Wood posts held the wood walkways in place. Both had stood for generations, had weathered storms in daily use without showing the least wear. Ships of all sizes came and went, with boxes and barrels, cans and canisters. I guessed their contents, their origins and destinations. Most would understand, but I wasn't understood. They knew not what they were missing, even if it were only my imagination. The town rose at dawn and slept at dusk, except for its longshoremen. The ships didn't sleep, so neither did they. On weeknights, I went home at sundown, but on weekends, I stayed at my perch. I don't know why. It's not like it differed by night. Moreover, the darkness dimmed my sight. The mind needs raw material. Still, I was always there, watching the dark forms floating to and fro. There were two lights on these nights, the moon and the lighthouse. The moon overlooks every town. The lighthouse only seaports. Between them, things went without incident. The lighthouse fascinated me more. The moon had been studied and explained. It had no blank spaces for the mind to fill. But the lighthouse was a mystery, to me at least. How? How could man's creation hold a candle to the divine's? I will explain. We know what a lighthouse is made of, how it is made, and why. We know its appearance, outside and in, and how its light works. But that's only half the equation. What of the man inside? Where does he sleep? Where and what does he eat? Has he any time off, and if so, what does he do with it? Has he any hobbies? Any friends, any family that visit or that he visits? And most of all, why his occupation? These questions dog me. Again, the moon leaves nothing to the imagination. The lighthouse did. By night I laid awake, images of him and his home swirling through my mind. Eventually, I vowed to make them real. Where to begin? The dock hands would know. Do you know who keeps the lighthouse? I asked. I don't, one man told me. And if you don't mind, I have work to do. Ah, yes, I affirmed. Sorry to have bothered you. I was incorrect. I made the rounds, pausing and asking passerby. How am I to know? They asked in return. Disappointment turned to frustration, but curiosity kept. Their ignorance surprised me. The man lighted the way for the ships, but for him, we wouldn't even be on maps. I would have to find him myself. Thus, I set forth in steps. The first was distance. I was in town, and he was out there, with great waters there between. I could swim, having learned how, but hadn't since. I could row, something I'd never done, but could learn. It could be a minor achievement, for which I could be awarded. It was easier, and if done correctly, I wouldn't get wet. Thus, I needed a boat. I could buy, borrow, or build one. Building one was easy. Wait. It wasn't. Buying one was easy. Being near water, boating was a popular hobby. Ensley's Aquatics catered to it. I had never been, but knew its address and went promptly. It was one room, selling only rowboats and paddles. Shelves lined its walls, oars and paddles its shelves. The boats stood against the far wall, besides the counter where the keep kept watch. "What you looking for?" he asked. What you sell, I replied. Budget? Negligible. Like my prices. He pulled a lemon from the wall and laid it on the counter. I could have asked of its age, quality, and integrity. I did not, and for $17 it was mine. Carried it home like a surfboard. Luckily, my trip was brief. The day arrived. As always, I perched on the beach, watching the ships and their cargo. I left the boat at home so suspicions wouldn't rouse. For once, dock work was not my focus. At dusk, I returned home and fetched my boat. Before I left, I scanned my neighborhood, ensuring it was asleep. For some reason, I'd come to feel I must keep my plan concealed. Luckily, this looked to be no issue. The town changed at night, in a way I'd only sampled when walking home on weekends. A shiver crawled up my spine, telling me I'd missed nothing. It ceased as I reached the shore where the workmen were at last retiring. Again I paused, hiding behind a store. Eventually the path cleared and I went. I peered in the water and dipped my toe, then withdrew it. It was cold, colder than ever before, like my toe would snap off and fall in. Luckily, I would not be swimming. I laid my boat onto the sand, sat down, and hoisted my paddles. As I entered, I turned back to the docks. I needn't have. The hands were gone. While I liked being unseen, I was also confused. I was still close enough to hear and see them in my peripherals, yet they were gone without a trace. Again, this was my first time rowing. Others would have practiced, perhaps with a teacher first, but I faced the waters unprepared. Luckily, there was no storm, no rain, thunder, or lightning, no waves rising forth. There was, however, something I could not explain. The water seemed to rise in small ripples, as if to thwart my progress. It was hard to overcome. I realized just how unprepared I was, and I should have turned back. Still, my arms sprained and my palms blistered, I forged ahead. I managed to succeed, if only scarcely. Something, it seemed, was trying to thwart me, but why? I dismissed the thought. Between the darkness and the distance, I could see only the light, not the house, and I pressed forth. Soon it would grow brighter and larger. This would not be easy. The water, not content with simple swirls, began to rain from the sky. First as droplets, then as hail. My meager vessel rocked left and right. Something, I thought again, this time aloud. By then, my arms were so exhausted, I nearly dropped my paddles. They nearly fell into the water. I just barely stopped this, knowing I could have died. I peered through the darkness. The light still shone. I then looked back and couldn't believe what I saw. The storm occurred only above the water. It ended at the beach. The town, what little I could see, was unaffected. I had never seen nor heard of such phenomena, but I had no time to speculate. I forged ahead, growing weary. Soon the lighthouse appeared in silhouette. I quickened, not wanting to brave the waters any longer than I must. When I reached the shore where, pelted by rain, I parked my boat and stood slowly, then something else. From the water, the shore looked smooth and flat, yet sharp pain greeted my first step. Son of a bitch! I raised my foot in the air and, while holding it, peered down. A rock had risen from the sand, as if to halt me. The thought returned and was again dismissed. By then I was sopping wet. My feet were blistered. Others may have lost resolve, but mine only strengthened. I had not endured this all for nothing. Up close I saw the lighthouse. Its walls were white, spotless, unfaded, and unchipped. Much like the dock, it showed no signs of aging. I had to find the door and assumed it was in back. Trudged around and saw I was correct. In my mind, I'd already written and rehearsed my introduction. Knock, no response. Knock. Again, no response. Perhaps he was asleep or not expecting visitors? Would the door swing open? Would he loom in the precipice? Would he demand my name and business only to tell me off? Exhausted, I sank into the door. Creak. It opened behind me. Startled and surprised, I leapt to my feet. This was not an accomplishment, but was a success. The man had heard someone outside. Alarmed, he was racing forth, brandishing a weapon. Or should have been. Though confused, I would not relent. I stepped in, slowly and without hesitation. "Can you hear me?" I whispered. It seemed not. I paused and listened. My ears must have failed me. No steps, no breaths, no doors opening and closing. Nothing to my chagrin. I crept forth and turned a corner, finding myself in the main room. It was unremarkable, round with cement walls and a spiral staircase leading to the deck, as seen in pictures. On the deck was a door. Behind it, I assumed, was the projector. A disappointment. It's not why I'm here, I reminded myself. I was still disappointed. You can tell a man's character from the home he keeps. This man was an ordinary slob. As I thought this, something strange began. The atmosphere began to thicken. I could almost reach forth and touch it. I did just that and quickly wished I hadn't. A jolt of what felt like electricity struck my hand, and it withdrew on reflex. What to do, I wondered, gazing around in unease. My instincts told me to flee and fast. Naturally, I ignored them. At last, I knew why he was gone. He had fled this, and yet the light shone. He must have left recently and must have been near. Lighthouse man! I called as loudly as I could. No response. Lighthouse man! Again, no response. He'll return, I reasoned. He had to in time. This was his living. As I would soon learn, he wouldn't, and I had been mistaken. The light shone from the deck, clearly as programmed. Curious as to how, I scoured the structure. The interior was small and open concept. It needn't be explored. Everything was visible from any point within. I need only stand in the center and gaze around from the floor to the ceiling. I did and saw nothing. At last I ascended the staircase. Its steps creaked beneath my feet. The door on the deck was closed. I tried the knob and it opened, revealing a second round room. In the center stood the beacon, roughly 10 feet tall and wide, with 4 legs for a platform and a tubular trunk tilted to the window. I gazed where it pointed and saw the night sky. I crept slowly to the front and peered into its light. In doing so, I noticed something peculiar. Its screen was soft and pliable, not like glass, but like flesh. There was no bulb. The light seemed organic, as if bioluminescent. The surface was colored brass, but wasn't brass. Its texture was like leather. Its 4 legs were legs, ending not in flat bases, but in paws with outstretched claws, digging into the floor. What is this? I shuddered. Luckily, contrary to my expectations, it didn't advance. It didn't even seem to notice me. It simply stood in place. The atmosphere thickened further. Anger buzzed in the air around me. This time, I listened to my instincts. I fled and fast, leaving the door wide open in my wake. Be there, I gasped. The storm could have swept off my boat. As I ran, I noticed something else. The jags from earlier had vanished. The surface was smooth. This was both convenient and a bother. Luckily, my boat awaited, paddles at its side. I stepped in, sat on the center bench, and gripped them. With a nudge, I returned to the water. Before leaving, I turned and glanced over my shoulder. The light now seemed eerie, haunting, and above all, aware. Even as I turned and pressed ahead, I felt it on my back and neck. There, I saw 2 more Natalie's. First the ripples, then the rain. Like the jags, both had vanished. Somehow I hadn't noticed it was no longer raining at first, but whatever. My mind was in no way eased. Whatever sought to keep me from the lighthouse now sought me gone. I glanced back again and saw only its silhouette. All in well, I reasoned, and sought nothing more of the place. Just then I saw small lights. A number had appeared above the water, not behind, but beside me. I knew not what they were, but would take no chances. I rowed as fast as I could, but failed to outpace them. Their movements were effortless and unwavering. However, they seemed not to pursue me. In fact, they showed no interest. I watched them grow massive and begin changing shape. I rested my paddles and watched in trance. These are the ships I had long watched. I peered in their windows and saw something I hadn't before. They were unmanned. As a quick double take verified, there was no captain, pilot, or crew in or on any of them. Like the lighthouse, they functioned on their own. What are you? I murmured. Raindrops fell to the water. There they did not dissolve. They burned and sizzled on its surface all around me. I gazed upward and watched. They weren't made at all of water. Their color was not clear but black. Their substance not smooth but thick and tar-like. Growing increasingly unnerved, I gazed downward. All around me, the sea was the very same. By then, I longed only to return home and collapse. Luckily, the shore was plainly visible. I paddled forth. As I gazed forth, however, I wasn't sure I could. A number of glowing lights had appeared on the docks, like those that had grown into the ships. Pray tell, what would it turn out to be, I wondered. They too began to grow to the size of men. Then they slowly assumed form, heads and torsos, arms and legs with hands and feet. Distinct features began to appear, ones I recognized all too well. I should have been guarded. I should have been subtle, but I wasn't. The night had left me in a blur. What does it matter at this point, I reasoned. I rowed further to the side, so I paralleled the docks, hoping it would suffice. Perhaps when I reached the shore I could escape on foot from whatever fate was waiting. I arrived and parked, haggard and exhausted. I'd been at sea for scarcely 2 hours, but it felt more like a year. I sighed in relief. The dock hands labored, paying me no heed. Indeed, they seemed not to notice me at all. I had only to walk home and collapse. As for my discoveries, I could ponder later. Inside each were things I'd never seen before, things I couldn't fathom uses for, things I couldn't fathom anyone wanting in their homes, things I struggled and failed to look away from. There were bottles and jars, slimes, mold, and oozes, all the colors of the rainbow and a few more, dusts and powders of varying coarseness, what seemed like weapons that couldn't just kill a man, but slice and dice and grate his skin, strain and melt his organs, and pulverize his bones. And in the case of one grotesque tubular device, drain his blood for Lord knows why. Every barrel, jar, and bottle, every handle bore a symbol, an angled skull with black wings extending from its sides. Beneath it was an inscription in a language I'd never seen before, but which I knew was the name of the manufacturer. What company produced such items? Where were they based, and what were their yearly profits? At last I succeeded. I trudged home, boat and arm, paddles in my boat just as I'd bought them. Passed quietly to my neighborhood, to my street, and at last my home. In each house the lights were off, the windows black. My neighbors were sound asleep. I trudged inside and rested my boat on the den floor, then retired to a night of shallow sleep. The next day had just begun. The sky was gray. The sun had yet to rise. I rose and crept outside to test the waters, as it were. There I saw them. My neighbors were not only awake but out. Not just some, but all of them. They lined the sidewalks and weren't smiling. But there had been a calamity, a building fire or something, I hoped. I spun and rushed home. We had to run, fleet and fast. My parents had no time to dress. I had none to explain. They would understand when we got outside. I would if we made it any further.